Hey there. So I'm going to show you how to create a simple looped animation inside Photoshop, both as a hand-drawn image and as a just regular boiled image if you want to have one thing loop over and over and over in the background, for example, a textured piece of paper. And so I'm going to walk through those two steps. And so first things first, I'm going to go to Create New, and 800, 800, 72, and let's just call this loop. And this is just a test file, so it doesn't really matter what size I'm working on. And go to create. And right now I'm in the motion workspace. And if yours doesn't look like this, go to Window, Workspace, Motion, and you can always reset motion. And what I'm going to do is, since I'm going to be dealing with hand-drawn images in a little bit, I'm going to set my timeline frame rate to be 12. Just for this project, it's a little bit easier to animate drawings per second rather than 30 drawings per second, which is the default because it's usually set to 30 frames per second. So I'm going to go to Create Video Timeline, and the thing to do first is go to the flyout window, set timeline frame rate, and 12 frames per second. And when I did that, it turned my background layer into a layer that was editable. And since I want to keep this, I don't want to be drawing on a layer that is white. I'm going to make sure to lock this and create a new layer. And once this is here, I'm just going to zoom in so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to create a circle on this image, or the animation I'm going to create is just like a circle that zooms into itself. And the first thing to do is take your layer and shrink it down to 1 frame. So if I look at this, right now my drawing is only 1 frame in duration. And I'm going to go to my layers panel over here, and I'm going to hold down Alt or Option and click and drag this layer so it duplicates it perfectly. It retains the same layer size. If I do Command J on this, usually the tool we use for duplication, notice that it doesn't retain the layer size. And then I've got to shrink it down all over again. It's just a lot more work. So Command Z, go to the layer panel, and Alt J, and I'm going to have 4 drawings here. Once I have these set up, I'm going to add them all to the same time layer inside my timeline. And I'm just clicking and dragging, and notice that it puts everything inside a single video group. So I could call this one circles, just to keep myself a little bit more organized. And I'm going to drag this bottom layer, this background layer, to there, and maybe I'm going to call this BG, just so I know what I'm working on. And the first things first, I'm going to shrink my brush size a little bit, and I'm just going to draw a circle inside here. And if I go to the next frame, I can't see my previous frame. And I want to see my previous frame because I need to be able to see what I'm drawing over. And to do that, I'm going to go to the flyout menu again and go to Enable Onion Skins. And now I can see my previous drawing. And I'm going to increase the size of the circle on this one. And I'm using the mouse to do this, so it's a little wonky. And going to the next one. And notice I can still see my previous frame. And going to the next one. And make sure you're clicking on the layer itself. Alright, so this is a circle that's radiating outwards. Now, if I play this forward, notice that I'm getting a little bit of an echo because it's still showing me the onion skins. So I'm going to go back here, Enable Onion Skins, which turns it off. And I can see this is, radiating out from the center. If I wanted to add in another frame, I can easily either create a new layer, go through the process we just did, or drag this to the top here. So now I have one that's the same size. And I can go Command A, which highlights everything around it, and delete. And I was not selected on the layer itself. So there we go, delete. And notice that my background wasn't extended to that layer there. And what I want to do is I want to start this out with like a little star thing at the beginning. So I'm going to turn my Enable Onion Skins back on, and since my marching ants are still here, my selection, I'm going to get rid of it, so I'm going to do Control D just to deselect it. So I'm going to start this with just a little boop. All right, cool. Just so it has like a little thing at the beginning. Enable onion skins. Cool. And the next step that I would do is if I wanted to duplicate this and have it repeat over and over and over again, I'm going to select all of the layers inside my layer panel. So I just did Shift and select on all of these, or Shift and click, left click. And then now is when we can use Command J. Since we're selecting multiple layers, it's going to retain that layer size. And so I just pressed it over and over again until I got 6 seconds worth of animation there. Drag this out just so we can see that that actually worked. Cool. So that's looping over and over again. And if I wanted to position this or move it around over time, I need to convert this whole shape or series of layers into a smart object. So I'm going to close that just so I can see they're all inside that group. Right click and convert to smart object. Now, all of those previous layers have been converted into one solid one that we can manipulate over time or add an adjustment layer to. And if we need to go back and change anything, such as the colors inside here, I can double click on this thumbnail and it brings me to my original layer with all of my images inside here. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to make this just scroll across the screen. So I'm going to drop down my layer with a little caret, transform keyframe, and Command T just to position it off frame here. Hit enter, and I'm going to we'll jump to 2 seconds. Command T, and holding down Shift just so it goes across the frame on the same position, and hit enter. And notice that it automatically creates a keyframe for me. If I drag the work area to right there, it'll highlight inside this one space here. You can see that it's highlighted, and that shows me that it's just gonna play back this part of the animation. And then we've got our traveling little loop going over. Now, if I wanted to quickly change the color of this, I can double click on the layer, go to my adjustments, add a hue and saturation, add colorize, jump up the saturation, and change it quickly here. Now before I exit this, I need to do Control S to save it. And when I go back to loop here, now it is updated inside this file. Awesome. There's other ways to change the color. That's one of them. Now, if I wanted to have a looping background of images, we're going to go through a similar process. And I've already picked out a couple images of paper, so I'm just going to bring them in, place linked, paper 1, and have this increase in size, like that. And zoom out, because I think I actually missed a little bit. Zoom back even more. Command T, file, place linked, paper 3, like that, and file, place linked, paper 2. This one's not as great quality, but totally fine. And so those are all placed in here, and I'm going to shrink these all down so they're 1 frame, and I think I will eventually spread these out to 2 frames because I think they're a little bit fast. And I'm going to drag each one to the same layer as the first one or the second one. It doesn't matter. They just all need to be on the same layer. So now they're in a video group like this. And I'm going to call this paper texture. Hit enter. And I'm going to drag these to the beginning. And I'm going to walk through and do the same process. So I'm going to select these inside my layer. Command J, Command J, Command J. And since I only need it to go this long, that's fine. So I'm just going to take this whole layer, right click, convert to smart object. You don't necessarily need to convert it to a smart object if it's just a background, but for the sake of keeping everything organized, it's helpful. So now if I play this back, we now get our paper texture working on top of it. So then I could take the circle, Command J it, and notice that if I Command J it, it loses the transform properties. So Command Z, Command Option Z. If I Alt drag, notice that it will keep those same properties. So I could offset this a little bit so they loop, and then duplicate this again, offset this one, cool, and then I'm gonna do this one more time, just because I think this will look cool. Okay, so then if I play this back, let's see how this looks. Notice it's not playing back at real time. That's totally fine. If I wanted to export this as a movie, just to walk through that, click, you can do it in two places. One is inside this menu, and you go to Render Video, or File, Export, and Render Video is here as well. This one's a little bit closer. Render Video, takes a second. And I'm going to choose Adobe Media Encoder. Yours should be here by default. And select folder, just so you know where you're saving it. Recent places, tutorials. Select folder, loop.mp4, document size, to make sure this matches what you had, 12 frames per second, looks great. And if you only wanted a selection, right now we can see that this is just adjusted to my work area, and that's selected by default. But if you only wanted like 3 frames, you could say start frame, end frame, or you could select all frames. And you hit render, and it'll take a second. And that was pretty quick. And so let's go to our recent places, tutorials, and loop is here. And if I play this, it goes super fast. So this is where you may want to go back and, you constantly export just to see what your piece looks like, because sometimes you'll find it's playing slower inside Photoshop, and you really want to make sure that it's doing the animation that you want it to do. So export occasionally so you can see how it actually looks. I hope this is helpful, and I'll see y'all later.